Good afternoon, everybody. So we thought we should do a webinar to follow up the Completely Retail Marketplace, which we attended last week. For those of you who are not familiar with CRM, it's an annual convention of, I guess, the great and the good from the retail property world of all shapes and sizes. And to me, it was amazing to get together. Well, I think there's about 2,000 people attended the event last week. And it was just superb to get together with some old friends and some colleagues, which we haven't seen for 18 months. And there was a real tremendous buzz in the air. Personally, the biggest takeaway, that there was an overwhelming positivity in the room, that people were back doing acquisitions on the acquisitions trail, looking for sites, buying properties, back together, doing stuff, doing property deals and making things happen, which was just superb to feel and to speak to people about. Clearly, there were two clear winners for the requirements down there, which we're talking about today. Convenience retail being one and drive-throughs being the other one. Super competitive, but equally clearly very rewarding for the right sites and the right projects. So to help us today, I thought I'd bring a couple of experts along. On the retail point of view, I thought it'd be great to bring a retailer along for convenience retail. On the drive-through, we thought I'd mix it up a bit and bring a developer on board, but equally somebody who was ex-coffee operator, acquisition specialist. So without further ado, my expert number one, and you may hopefully agrees with that, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Shepard from Central England Co-op. Hi, Paul, how are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you, Simon. Very good, thank you, good.
Cool, okay. So Paul, we've probably known each other for 7 or 8 years. I think we've done about, I don't know, 12, 15 projects together over that period, with that, I think, from development sites. We've knocked buildings up from the ground up. We've sort of converted buildings and just done some straight acquisitions for you. I personally would say it's a really, really great team to work with and for, and tremendous integrities. I would recommend working with them every single day of the week. So we'll come back to Paul in a minute. On the drive-through side of things, I'd like to introduce you to Daniel Goodman. Hi, Daniel, how are you doing today? Oops, can you hear us? I didn't hear you then, but you okay? Can you hear him, Paul, or not?
I can't hear you, Daniel, actually. I think...
you hear me now?
Yes,
yeah, no, yes, there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. Sorry for the technical glitch.
Don't worry, just give us a quick sound check. So, so Daniel works at Harkalm Development. Again, we've known for many, many years. They are very well-known acquisitive developers, investors, specialising in, amongst others, through drive-throughs, obviously today. Again, I would recommend working with those guys tremendously. They're a great quality team, and again, great integrity. And finally, hi, Paul, my brother and co-founder. Hi, how are you doing today?
I was wondering whether the list of experts was going to finish at Daniel, and whether I was going to be. I was like, I've got 2 experts with me, and my brother's also here too. So I was like, hang on a minute, where's this going?
But anyway, I'm hoping he's going. I'm fine. So I'm hoping you're going to talk to us about ways to access this marketplace, and then again, obviously, Nimbus can help you achieve your goals if you want to supercharge your results, I suppose. So Paul S. From Central England, do you want to just give us a little bit of a backstory, what you've been up to, and maybe give us some idea of what you're looking for and some trends in the convenience market, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. Got a couple of slides, so I'll try share the screen and see whether that works. Can you see that, gents?
Yeah,
yeah, brilliant. So pretty much, this is our latest acquisition flyer. Just give you a bit of an idea on the requirements. Central England Co-op are an independent society operating. I'll show you in a second. There we go. Basically, the centre of the country. We've been around for a long, long time, 165 years as a society. We operate over 400 trading outlets. The leaflet pretty much covers a lot of that. We're very, very acquisitive. We open 15, 20 stores a year. We'll do more if we can, but we're more a quality over quantity business. And we are out there at the moment looking for neighbourhood convenience stores and other convenience stores in the marketplace. We are doing other footfall driven sites at the moment and such like. So Simon and Paul have asked me to talk to you today about the market trends and what's hot at the moment. I had a look through earlier today, really, just in preparation for today and this talk. I would say that probably 85–90% of the pipeline at the moment can probably be broken down into about 3 categories, and then being new housing developments, community district centres in and amongst new developments, auto I would call as car sales, repairs, MOTs, hand car washes, that sort of thing, and then also leisure hospitality, be it pubs, restaurants, hotels. That's generally, I would say, most of the pipeline. There are the odd anomaly in there, but generally them sites for us work very, very well. A lot of them, I'll go through some examples. The new housing developments, as the housing market is constantly still booming, we are seeing a lot of pockets of new housing going in. We've got a couple of schemes there on the slide. We've got one in at 120. We've also got one there in where there's 1,000 odd houses. And the district centre, we like it to sit sort of on a prominent position on the entrance to the housing. And ourselves and our competitors are very much excited to see any of these opportunities come through from the developers, the house builders and land promoters. These are long burn schemes. They do take a long time to come through. I'm working on some at the moment that we've had in the pipeline for 5–8 years, because we have to have the right amount of housing and infrastructure in before we can go in and trade. So there's a lot of these sites in the pipeline at the moment for the coming years of good quality sites. When we look at auto car sales, MOT, repair, hand car wash, these generally sit in, again, you'll see a pattern here, prominent, visible locations, good accessibility. They vary in size, shape, as do the pub market, but generally, if you can pick the right one, like I've got on screen there, I've sort of scribbled over the addresses so you can't all go after it, but this one's this one's 0.45 of an acre, brilliant shape. We've got the Ghost Island there on the road. We've got a pub site across the road, and in amongst some really good housing and new housing as well that's gone in, some good quality. So this is the site that we've been looking at as well. So I've got a test case as well on the next slide here of an older site that's actually coming out of the ground now with Shepard Developments, and there you'll see the Nimbus screen there, which shows that you've got 0.947 of an acre in the centre of a very nice affluent village in West Suffolk called Stanton. As far as convenience store goes, I'm sure you'll all see that really sits beautifully in the centre of the village. And what we've got there with Shepard Developments is a convenience store with dedicated parking and servicing, and then 6 houses behind because of the size of the plot. And we will look at lots of other different opportunities, be it residential above, residential behind, residential at the sides. Just depends on what we can fit on the land to get to the right development for all concerned. If the site here was probably slightly wider, we would probably go with more retail on it. So we would probably bring in more supporting retail, such as I still call them A5, your hot foods and such like alongside. Here though, there's just enough space to fit us in, so it's just us. And that's an old car MOT service station and such like. So that's got planning, and that's actually a cleared site now, and that's going to be delivered next year. So, and the other one obviously is your leisure sector, your pubs, your restaurants, and your hotels. Over the last 10+ years, these sites have been a fantastic source of sites for the convenience store market. They sit generally in a good size plot of 0.3 to 0.5 of an acre. They have parking, they have good accessibility, they have good visibility. They sometimes convert. If not, we look to knock down, rebuild. This is one that we've just purchased up in Southport, where we will be working up a scheme to convert the existing building with residential above, supporting retail alongside, and then the back house at the back, and about 20 odd car parking spaces. So the pub market is very, very in a sort of state of flux at the moment, with the operators still sorting their own estate out post-COVID. Some sites have had deals done on them. A lot of the pub companies generally will put their sites to market, and there is a very bullish market at the moment for these type of sites. This one had a lot of bidders on it, and we had to buy this unconditionally very quickly to win the bidding on it. So yeah, there is a great source of opportunity at the moment, but it is a very bullish market. So kind of gives you a bit of an overview of what I would say the core sectors are for the trends at the moment. There are other sites out there, definitely. I've got some really anomalies out there, but generally 0.3 to 0.5 of an acre, more if there is. We will put something on it, be it retirement living, being care home. I've looked at sites up to 2 acres, 3 acres, 10 acres. We will work with other developer partners, such as Daniel, and we will look to fit anything on a site that can get us in there to open and trade and sell bread and milk, and we'll do what we need to do with the rest of the site to get the opportunity. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of an overflow. I've kind of used up a few of my minutes there, and I'll take any questions later.
I think uniquely, Paul, you also will do freehold and leasehold. I mean, you want to make the deal work, so you'll be quite flexible in your approach to that. Is that right?
Yeah, there's not a deal structure out there I don't think I would consider. We do own some of our assets, a lot of them, and we do develop some ourselves, but we also work very well with a lot of developers on a leasehold basis, or we would look to buy back the completed shell. But yeah, freehold, leasehold, long leasehold, anything we would consider. Yeah,
you're structuring all different ways, and if you just look at acquisitions for somebody, you sort of pay an acquisitions fee to the agent. If it's
definitely. If you're an agent out there and you're out there finding sites and you can tap into them, anything off market is we'll definitely look after you and pay you, not a problem.
Cool. And how competitive is the world at the moment then? Is it sort of
it's very busy. It's very busy, leasehold and freeholds. I think post-COVID, a lot of people have woken up to the fact that your local shop is kind of recession proof. If you get it right, people want to stay local, people want to support the local businesses. Let me stop sharing that now, actually. So yeah, I think the prices have gone up, the competitors have gone out and recruited, and everybody's out there looking for similar sites. So that's really just added higher rents. The yields have sharpened, and the market's very, very bullish at the moment. So it's an interesting time.
How are you finding build costs? Because obviously there's a lot of pressure with a lot of places. I think post Brexit as well. I think Brexit and pandemic has pushed build costs.
Yeah, with the sites that have already got planning and actually due to start on site at the moment, and tenders coming back, it's difficult. The labour shortage, the material shortage, construction costs have gone up. A year or so ago, people were saying, they've gone up 25%. There's now talk they've gone up another 25%. So for what you were building them for now, it's not doubled, but it's a hell of a lot more. So you were right to go into software.
Well, time will tell.
Yeah.
What about just the logistics, trucking? You have any issues around that, sort of servicing and things like that?
We have our own distribution, and it's going well, but there are issues. I can't lie. There are sort of supply chain issues, which we're fighting through on a daily, weekly basis. But we're doing what we can to keep the shelves up.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well that's really, really helpful. Thanks, Paul. We'll do a live Q&A at the end. We'll obviously invite
and if anybody wants a copy of that leaflet with all the contact details, we can get that out after Thru, Simon and Paul, no problem.
Perfect. That's really helpful. Thanks, Paul. So Daniel, are you okay to sort of give us a bit of a background about Harkalm and yourself? Obviously, you've got as I said, you've got a background in coffee acquisitions as well. So it's a sort of, you can see it from both the poacher and the gamekeeper side,
Yeah.
whichever way you look at it. But do you want to just give us a bit of a background?
Of course. Let me just try and find my slides, and I can try and bring them up and I can talk you through this. Let me know when everyone, can you see that?
Yeah, they're not presenting yet. That's it. Perfect.
So yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for the intro. My name's Daniel Goodman and I work for the Harkalm Group. I'm the development director at the Harkalm Group. As you mentioned, I have got my work experiences. I worked for retailers before joining Harkalm. I worked for Pizza Hut, Tesco and Starbucks. So I was doing acquisitions all through retailers. And so prior to joining Harkalm, I was doing acquisitions in London and the South East for Starbucks, and joined Harkalm over 4 years ago to head up the development side of the business and focus on drive-throughs. So as you say, I like to think I've got a bit more of an advantage to some of our competitors. I can assess it from a developer's perspective and a tenant's perspective, and vet the sites appropriately. So when we do find something that works, we can normally go full steam ahead pretty quickly. But just a brief overview, a synopsis of who the Harkalm Group are, as I'm sure we're not as well known as Central England Co-op. We are property investors and developers. We've been in existence for about 15 years. We've got a property portfolio of 200 properties, around 200 properties, and we specialise in the retail and leisure sectors. There's a number of pillars to our business, so we'll require income producing investments, ideally to national covenants across the UK, and that can range from vacant buildings to properties where tenants have leases of the whole, and we'll look to add some value by maybe surrendering the upper parts and extracting some value from residential development from the uppers, or re-gearing leases. So that's one particular pillar to the business. And then, a main focus of mine and the business is the development side of the business, where there are, I suppose, three pillars. The convenience side of the business, where we work with convenience store partners across the UK. We are doing one with Central England in Yorkshire. So we'll find vacant buildings or land or any of the requirements Paul just mentioned, go away, get planning and build to the specification. Prominent to this particular presentation is the roadside development. So we'll buy land across the country, get consent for a roadside development, and I'll mention our requirements and tenants' requirements in a little bit. Get planning, build out, and then put away in our portfolio. And finally, we've got an alternative sector development arm where we'll acquire and develop for petrol filling stations or educational uses, that sort of thing, or even pub uses. So I've tried to split this presentation up into a couple of sections. So roadside requirements, this is actually Harkalm roadside requirements, and in a little bit I'll discuss some of the tenants' requirements, or what I believe the tenants' requirements are. So Harkalm roadside requirements are anything from 0.4 of an acre up to 5 acres. 0.4 of an acre can usually house one drive-through development, whereas 5 acres is normally a development which consists of a large retail warehouse, a supermarket, and a couple of drive-throughs. We ideally look for sites with a minimum road count of 15,000 vehicles passing daily. That is, that is directed by the tenants, but the road count is the passing trade, the traffic for the operator. So it's very important, and they have to be prominent, ideally off roundabouts. So you've got dual access, which is convenient for the operators. We consider buildings or sites with existing buildings on. I think quite a new trend, or an updated requirement for some of these drive-through operators is they're starting to look at conversions a lot more frequently than they did in the past. When we started looking at drive-throughs 4 or 5 years ago, the drive-through operators were adamant they wanted new 1,800, 2,200 square foot buildings. But due to how competitive the market is, due to the race for space, these operators are starting to look at conversions, whether that's car showrooms, pubs, whatever it may be. There's a real urgency and flexibility from these operators to expand. And yeah, Harkalm will acquire across the UK. We've PC'd developments down in Gosport, which is on the south coast, all the way up to Boston and Lincolnshire. So just gives you an example of the sort of width and breadth of the country will go to develop these sites. In terms of tenants requirements, the sizes you can see there on the presentation, there's quite a wide range there, and that's probably due to the wide range of tenants in the market. As I said, 4 or 5 years ago, coffee operators were seeking 1,800 square feet. Now they'll do anything from 1,000 square foot, 1,250 square foot up to 2,500 square feet, which again demonstrates how flexible these operators are going to be. And a number of them are starting to look at drive-through only developments or drive-throughs. So it's essentially there's no indoor seating. The trade's only generated from people using the drive-through lane, which enables developers and operators to unlock sites which they haven't been able to deliver in the past, because we can acquire smaller sites, so anything from 0.2 to 0.3 of an acre. Where do these tenants want to be? Ideally, they want to have good retail generators close by, so near supermarkets. People go away, do their shopping, jump in the car, and go and get some food or a coffee on the way home without having to leave their car. It's really convenient, and it enables their food not to get warm or defrost, whatever it may be. Retail warehousing, again, go out, buy a sofa. Sometimes you want to sit down, dwell, and have a think about, is it the right purchase? They'll go and get a coffee or go and get some food and think about it. External seating has always been important, but I think in these COVID times, it's becoming more and more important. Outside, sitting outside is obviously a lot safer than being inside around other people. And I think the general public at times prefer to be outside. Dedicated or shared car parking, again, is really important to tenants. It's dependent on the type of development being built. If it's just a standalone drive-through, i.e. just one unit drive-through, then usually the whole car park's demised to that operator. But there's a number of different operators on the site. It's usually shared between each operator, but there'll be a certain number of spaces agreed between the operators for the development PC'd. And as I mentioned, in the roadside development drive-through sector, the operators are seeking and are considering conversions, which they didn't do previously. So everyone knows the established occupiers in the sector. You've got your McDonald's, who opened up the first drive-through in the UK, followed closely by BK, KFC, Starbucks, and Costa. But just due to, I suppose, the success of these operators, there are more new entries into the market. Leon, who've just been acquired by Euro Garages, are due to open their first drive-through pretty soon. Greggs are on a big acquisition drive to open up new drive-throughs. There's murmurs Pret a Manger looking at drive-throughs, and that, obviously this is only in the A1/A5 market, or Class E city drainage as it's known now. Who's to say that in the future, people like Boots or Specsavers, whoever it may be, not in the food and beverage world, will enter the drive-through market like there are in the US. It's a really, really busy market, and there really is a race for space, and I can see it constantly evolving, really. So just going to give you an example of some developments we acquired and PC'd over the last few years. Top left in Gosport was our first drive-through, Starbucks drive-through. It was a long time in coming. We had a lot of problems with planning. It was meant to be a 2-unit site, but we finally managed to get a consent for a Starbucks drive-through, which we acquired off the local authority, and had a pre-let in place at 23.5. Top right is a site we bought down in Sandwich, which is in Kent. I got consent to build a KFC on a new 15-year term to one of their franchisees. Again, to be honest on this, the planning was quite straightforward. We got it through pretty quickly. But as we did further DD, there were other challenges that came out. There were potentially archaeological remains, which we had to be careful of when digging out and building. There are slow worms on the site, and there are a number of utilities running through the site, which we had to be careful of and get easements and wayleaves from before construction commenced. Bottom left is a site we've just acquired down in Great Yarmouth, 3.5 acres. We haven't got any planning yet, but we are working through the local authority to see what they think would be best on that site before going out and agreeing to a tenant mix, or sorting out a tenant mix. But we just like the site next to an existing retail park out in East Anglia. And then bottom right, this site was acquired a few years ago, and I'm going to probably elaborate and say, actually try and demonstrate that it's not all plain sailing on these sort of drive-through sites, and there are challenges, and not everyone publicises them. But this is a site where we had a couple of drive-throughs agreed on pre-lets at the front, and interest from the supermarket to take a 20,000 square foot unit at the back. We had a pre-app with the local authority, which was supportive. Submitted the application, and it was refused 3 or 4 months later due to the environmental agency saying the site sat within flood zone 3B, which means no development is possible on the site. We're actually going through a process now to challenge that objection, which involves hydraulic modelling. But the purpose of me demonstrating this to the wider audience is to say it's not as easy as it looks. There are challenges. You have to be pretty persistent, and you have to persevere to overcome it. But we are confident we'll get there in the end. So just building on that, really, what are the challenges from a developer's perspective in building these drive-throughs? So I've mentioned planning. That is normally one of the main problems, where there's loss of green belt, the effect on the countryside, and incorporating planning as a highways, because these drive-through sites do bring a lot of customers to the site. So you sometimes have to contribute huge 278 contributions to enable that the highways are safe. Sometimes those 278 contributions can wipe out developers' profit. So it's just being mindful that there's enough contingency within your appraisal to factor that in. You've already mentioned build costs to pull. Again, that's something we're mindful of. Build costs are going up on a daily basis, which affects the profitability of the site. We're hoping it's more of a short-term problem rather than long-term problem. But again, just highlights the fact that there has to be some contingency within the appraisal. Utilities, I've mentioned on our Sandwich site, there are a number of utilities running through the site, and that's underground. Sometimes there's issues above where you have to redirect electricity cables or telephone cables, which again can be time intensive and costly. And finally, the race for space. There's not only just a race for space for tenants. There's a race for space for developers, because we're usually acting on behalf of a tenant. And if another developer or another party gets wind of that site's available, there's normally a bidding war which pushes up the price of the site, which in turn would lead on to the tenant having to increase their rent. But for sophisticated developers, there is only a ceiling price you can pay for a site before it becomes unfeasible. So yeah, the race for space definitely has a knock-on from a tenant to a developer's perspective. Just mentioning fees. Last year we paid out over £1.275 million to non-retained agents across not only the development side of the business, but the investment side of the business. It's very important to us at Harkalm that we incentivise our agents. So that's why we guarantee a minimum fee of £20,000 for any successful introduction on a roadside site. If it's a larger site and there's more profit in it, we'll be able to provide or pay a larger fee. But what we can say is it's a minimum fee of £20,000. We also do a number of profit shares with joint venture partners over most years. So if there's any landowners on here, or if there's any agents who want to utilise our funds and our expertise to unlock some sites, please do get in touch. Find my contact details at the bottom of this slide, and you'd be more than happy to discuss that with you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. So just a couple of questions. We obviously have a bit. So in terms of the build costs, I mean, some of these retailers have pods, don't they? Sort of prefabricated. Are you seeing more of that? Is that sort of going to expand? Because obviously takes the risk out of some of those unknowns, doesn't it? Or...
Not really. I think the easy part's developing the actual building. I don't think there's much of a difference between modular build or traditional build. We always find that the difficult part of any development is what's underground, really, and what foundations we have to use. So it doesn't really de-risk it. The risk is in what's in the ground from my perspective.
Okay, and what sort of electricity capacity do you need for that? I mean, the traditional C store is about 90, was it 100 kVA, if I remember right, on maybe a bit less, but is it a similar sort of number, or is it?
It depends. Most of these drive-through operators want 3-phase, but with the evolution of the EV charging, we sometimes have to bring more to site. Okay. The EV charging operators have to bring more to site. So each site is different and has its own challenges. But it's usually now a planning condition to put some EV charging on site, which does increase the capacity for voltage.
But then it brings football. There's a question I think we'll answer later on. I think somebody's raised a question about EV charging and things like that. So okay, I think we'll have some questions at the end. Thanks ever so much, Dan. It's really, really helpful, really interesting. Paul, maybe you could sort of just help with I suppose on the site finding the acquisition side of it and how we can.
Yeah, well, I was intrigued to see that Dan, obviously as a user of Nimbus, didn't put one of the challenges around as site finding. So maybe that's the answer, is that if you don't want challenges on a thing, you need Nimbus to do that. Maybe that's interesting. But I suppose what I wanted to do is start off with a question actually, which is. How are people finding it? In fact, I'm going to start somewhere else first. I'm going to come back to that. So I suppose what's kind of interesting is when you start thinking about how do I find these sites, how do I access these sites, how do I tap into that market where these sites are? For us, there's obviously two answers to that. There's on market, off market, obviously. But what was kind of interesting is that as you think about it, there's actually those two things actually break down into three things. So let's just kind of be really clear about it. So you've got on market, which, as we all know, is where you've got an agent instructed to go and sell stuff. This is the stuff that Paul's has been talking about, bidding hard to go and find stuff and buy stuff, where you're having to pay quite a lot and probably buy it unconditionally, given it's on the market with an agent revving that interest up. Or, of course, off market, which is the second one. But actually, there's two parts to this. The first part of that, obviously, is where you've got a retained agent, so somebody that you're working closely with that is then out there looking for the kind of stuff you're after and bringing that through to you. I suppose the one challenge around that is kind of, are they just working exclusively for you on that particular site, I suppose. And the second part then is deals that and opportunities you've gone and dug out yourself, in effect, where you've gone out and you've let a campaign or you've tapped into your black book and you've managed to find an agent that knows the owner that can kind of get you in touch and this sort of stuff. And I suppose to start off today, what I wanted to understand is what works best for the audience. Kind of how are people finding this themselves for the viewers that are watching today? So I'm going to launch a little poll. I want you to perhaps ask you just to answer that question for me. So are you finding stuff on market? Are you finding stuff off market through agents, or are you doing it direct to owners? So just while that's running, Daniel, perhaps you can start. So how do you find stuff? Are you on market? Are you off market through agents, or are you off market direct to vendor?
It's a combination of all three of those, really. To be totally honest, the on-market stuff is obviously more difficult because some developers don't have the capacity or don't like to source properties off market, which drives the price up on market. But I suppose the majority of the transactions we do are off market through agents or off market directly to owners.
Paul, are you similar sort of space or?
Exactly. Ideally, the bottom two. I would say the on-market stuff, I've got 1,000 examples even just this year, but yeah, the on-market stuff's just crazy. There's 10 plus bids going in on quite a lot of stock. As soon as convenience store drive-through operator starts to show an interest when we're in such a competitive marketplace, it just drives values massively. I think that pub site I showed earlier that I bought, I think it was about £150,000 over the guide price I had to pay. So yeah, it's hard work. Off market through agents, got a fair few direct with owners, or sometimes agents do the work, put me in touch as I like to be with the owners direct. So I don't always want the agents to do absolutely everything. Sometimes the owners, once we've unlocked the door and we've got a meeting, I don't mind taking that forward. I've got one at the moment that's off market through an agent, and I've now taken that on, and I'm drawing up the scheme and making the offer direct to the owner. The agent will still get paid, not a problem, but it's what the owner and me wants. The owner wants to know that he's not sometimes getting sort of chipped. They want to know they're getting the best value as owners. There's no one who owns half an acre of land in the country who's not got a brain between their ears to know they've got to try and get best value out of something.
Sure. Well, very interesting. So the poll's kind of just going to bring that to an end. And actually, I'm going to share the results because it's kind of interesting. So what we've got here is we've got sort of an even split, which is kind of cool because you've got kind of an even split between on market, off market, and direct to owners. So I actually ran a little survey of this in my LinkedIn profile. So this was a little while ago. This was kind of about a sort of month ago or so. And actually, I got a different result. So I got a result here, which this was the poll that I ran. I had about 3,500 views. I had about 60 people, 55 to 60 people kind of replied to that poll. And actually, I found that there was kind of 10% of people looking off market. Today, we've got kind of a third of people
on market.
On market rather.
Yeah.
A third of people today are looking on market, whereas actually in my LinkedIn profile, actually 10% were.
Yeah. Your LinkedIn profile lines up a little more with what Paul and Daniel are saying, that the majority of the work is off market, but split 50-50 between the two. So I think that sort of lines up with that one, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. So that's kind of interesting. And I thought what kind of then be useful is just to kind of to think about why is it we're bothered? Why is it kind of interesting? So what I decided to do is to look at what's the benefit of on market versus off market, and kind of what are the drawbacks, and where do we go for all of that? And I suppose the obvious answer to that is that on market is very interesting when you've got a willing seller, you've got open pricing. The challenge of it is that it's competitive. You've got to go in hard. You've got to, I suppose, to go in hard like that, you've got to take lower profit margins perhaps than the next person, or have lower bill costs than the next person, or indeed have higher GDVs than the next person in order to generate that kind of higher value at the bottom, in effect. Higher value, the residual value left over for what you can pay for this thing. I suppose the challenge we've often found with that is that then you have to do quite a lot of work to get to the point of submitting that offer. So you have to then get your scheme drawn up, get it costed, understand do some surveys and this sort of stuff. And actually that can be quite costly. Or if you're getting it done free, it's obviously burning goodwill and sort of the time of your professional team, in effect, to do all of that. There's obviously loads of places you can go and find that, lots of websites, doing Rightmove and Zoopla commercial, that kind of stuff, where you can find this stuff. But there are these kind of benefits around it being sort of willing sellers and open pricing, but of course those sort of rather key drawbacks at the same time. When you then kind of compare that to particulars that have been brought through to you, where it's sort of off market through an agent, of course, what's kind of nice about that is you can be quite passive in that. You can sort of, as long as you look after the back, you then just look after them, they'll bring this stuff through to you. And of course, what they should be willing sellers. I suppose the challenge with some of that stuff is it can be off profile. So I guess some of the stuff that gets sent through to you, Paul, and obviously to you, Daniel, won't necessarily quite work for the sort of stuff that you're looking for. And so you spend time on that. I suppose it's not particularly scalable because then you so ships at any one time paid, and of course that I suppose does misalign you. If this thing's bought, then you pay a fee at that point. If you don't buy it, then of course the agent doesn't get their fee, in effect. And I suppose there's always this question over, well, is the agent only talking to me, or is there other people that they're talking to at the same time, which I suppose always kind of worries you along that journey. I suppose the final bit, though, is when you go truly off market, I suppose that's where it starts to open up, because if you can go off and you can find these sites yourself, and you can then target the owners with a sort of knowing that you can drive value into a site, in effect, you know that the residual value of your development is higher than what this thing's worth, then of course you can often bid a bit more than what that thing's worth. You can then, you buy this stuff subject to planning, go and get your planning consent, share that sort of upside with the owner. And of course, that then is a truly scalable thing. And of course, then when you're doing that, you know that the sites are truly on profile. There's a challenge where you've got to go off and do it. There's a bit of time taking involved in that. you've probably got to educate that other use. I suppose whenever you hear the sort of the or something like that, the owner's aspirations start to go up, and of course you've got to go manage that sort of process to make sure that the owner fully understands what that interest actually means and how that sits relative to the perhaps other uses that might be competing with that. And that can take a little bit of time, but of course then what that does mean is you can unlock, with the benefit of that, have some time, get your planning consents in place and buy it at that thing kind of at that point. You do that as you find sites that work in you either let a campaign to the owners, or indeed you make some phone calls to them, or indeed tap into the sort of the industry's black book, where you can then get yourself into the sort of in touch with the particular owner themselves rather. So I suppose, how does Nimbus help? There's a whole bunch of stuff that Nimbus, and what I want to explain, you could read this slide. This is my job now, to explain how we can use a tool like Nimbus to support this sort of stuff. Why do people sort of putting this system in front of people? So I suppose what I would like to do next, I'd like to ask a poll of the audience again, if I could. What I'd like to answer is, what should we target? Should we target drive-throughs today, or should we go for convenience stores, or should we do both? Let's just see who wants what. Drive-throughs are winning at the moment. Ooh. Both are now catching back up again. I think, don't know if you actually see this or not, but it's
the most interesting presentation. That's what we're going to, yeah. This is
the drive-throughs are nudging it on convenience stores, only just, and then both is actually is the clearing out winner. So I think what we'll do is we'll focus on drive-throughs to start with, and then we're going to nudge into, in fact, convenience stores just made a bit of a late surge actually, but I think we're still just nudging with drive-throughs. We're going to start with drive-throughs, and then we'll have a bit of a convenience sort of bit to it as well. So we'll try and do both is the answer. To ask how you'd like me to search. So would you like me to search in London? Southeast, Southwest, Midlands, Northeast, Northwest. That's my final question on this little section. So if we could just ask the audience to let me know what they would like. That would be useful. Let's just see where everyone's like. So Midlands is winning. Midlands is winning. Paul, because that's where. So Midlands, sort of Southeast. Let's make a bit of a comeback now. So it's Midlands and the Southeast, I think, is kind of where we're Southwest catching up now as well, actually. So we've got really kind of the Midlands is the out and out winner. We've got the sort of the Southeast and the Southwest kind of almost equal in terms of where people are looking. So fabulous. Well, that's going to be fun. So let's jump into this. So this is the Nimbus Maps elite system that I'm using here. So anywhere particular in the Midlands we'd like to search? Anybody? Paul, have you got anywhere you think we should have a look at first, or Daniel, kind of anywhere you'd like me to search in particularly?
Peterborough. Let's say Peterborough.
Peterborough. There's a place I haven't been to. So let's have a look. So here's Peterborough. So I suppose the first things to understand are kind of what are those busy main roads and kind of how busy are they? Because one of the things that we're looking at for drive-throughs is traffic flow. We've got this kind of number of 15,000 car movements. I don't put on a challenging job. So what we have here at Nimbus is we have this little, and in the overlays, there's a thing which shows us the traffic flow movements in effect. So across Peterborough, what I can now see is all of those traffic counts for the Department of Transport, where I can then start to say, yeah, the 15,000 barrier in effect. So across here, this is sort of 13,733. It's a bit too low. Here we're 24,000. This road up here is all going to be kind of interesting. We've got the sort of the main A47, which is going to be obviously interesting too, but we're going to struggle to find site suspect on that, given it's sort of a sort of dual carriageway and stuff. I could focus down to Borges Boulevard is kind of looking along this sort of strip up here. We've actually got the McDonald's just there, actually, which is kind of interesting. There's your little enterprise car garage next door to it, which sort of, so I think what I'm ending up doing is looking along this sort of track down here to see what sort of opportunities there are along this sort of route down here that's going to be perhaps interesting for me. I know that that's now busy enough, so I'm kind of comfortable with that. The next thing we talked about is, well, how big are the sites we're looking for? We're looking for, according to Daniel, we're looking for 0.4 of an acre. So if we just close a second, what we also have in the Nimbus Maps system is we have this little property size filter here. So I can say, show me all the properties that are over 0.4 of an acre. Really simple. If I wanted to search for Harkalm only, I could type in 5 into that, but I'm going to do that. Let's do a Harkalm specific search for drive-through users in effect. I can also search a little bit further out. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to click search here. So that allows me to say there's a 20,000 car move or 24,000 pin that I've got then is Nimbus showing me a sort of a fit of all of the freehold ownerships in effect. These little red outlines are all freehold properties plotted across the map for me. They've been pre-measured, so I know that those site sizes sit within 0.4 of an acre to 5 acres. I then know that this road down here is then busy enough for us to go and target opportunities there. So we've got then a number of little properties that might be suitable. So we've got something down here, which is ESSO. So that's telling me it's a PFS owned by Eurogarages. Well, they're one of the sort of the big, they bought that in 2014. They've sold 3 properties in the last 18 months. I guess Eurogarages probably aren't particularly interesting for us. There's your Mackie D's already. And this kind of lump up here, isn't there, which is owned by TJ Morris Limited. So they could be kind of interesting. They bought that in 2019. They've sold 7 properties in the last 18 months, so that kind of could be interesting. This is a little ownership set. Let's just see who they are first. So TJ Morris own this property. They're based out of Liverpool, and they're actually a retail stores company. So they're actually not a developer. They're a retailer of some sort, shape or form. And kind of a look at perhaps the accounts, because have they struggled through lockdown? It's kind of interesting to know if they had any sort of problems going through that period of time. So are these people kind of interesting or not? I mean, it looks like quite a big company. This actually, we've got some very detailed accounts, but yes, I can have a look through that and just see how are they getting on. Are they making money at the moment? Are they losing money? Some quick whiz through. Apologies, it's taking me longer than I wanted it to. This is we'll get there eventually. They've got nearly £3 billion turnover. That's actually up 20% on last year. So they've traded like a dream through lockdown. They're actually making 210 million a year. So my guess is they're not particularly bothered about selling stuff at the moment. So maybe we'll move on to the next one. We could go and let's campaign, and we could go and look at that portfolio and see what else they own and see if we can get in touch with them through the back door, because actually maybe there's scope to carve a little piece off. Maybe there's scope to carve a piece off at the front here. We could just put a little drive-through at the front or something like that. Maybe that could be interesting. So that perhaps is an option for us. Again, there's some more sites further up, something up here. I don't know what this is. Let's have a look. See what that's owned by the council. That was something that Daniel talked about a moment ago, is unlocking stuff through the council and buying a piece of land off them. So they've got 3 acres there that kind of could be interesting. There's a community centre on it. It's a 10,000-foot community centre with a whole bunch of space across it. So maybe that's one to perhaps add to our workflow. So there's a little section up here we can add to workflow, which is going to help us with our letter campaigning up here in effect. So I've quite quickly found a bunch of sites that may or may not work. They've got a little sports social club up here. That was supposed perhaps something that Paul was talking about, those kind of little pubs and bars and this sort of stuff that kind of could be interesting. Something up here as well that perhaps is interesting. Salvation Army, they own something up there. Whether that's particularly interesting or not, I'm not sure. And then kind of health resource centres, etc. And then we're sort of into this sort of stuff where you've got the big sort of retail parks in effect up here. So there's anything kind of around that, whether sort of this sort of stuff perhaps could be interesting to look at as well, because obviously you've got sort of the Matland bit next door to it in effect. So that's how we're going to find stuff. That's how we find some of those opportunities and have a little look at those in effect. I suppose one of the things that's going to be interesting for me is saying, well, actually, if I'm building a convenience store for Paul, then is there, so we talked a little bit about drive-throughs, I kind of feel like I need to just cover a little bit of what Paul's interested in as well. And there's a few things that kind of could be interesting for this. So number one is that the golden number that we found for Paul when we were building out a lot of community stores for him, and indeed some of the other retailers, was actually that what they typically wanted back then. And Paul, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, but historically the convenience store operators wanted about 2,000 people within 500 meters of a location. And that typically meant, provided a bit of affluence in there, then usually they could get their trading figures to stack up. Is that still something you guys look for, Paul?
Yeah, we generally need around minimum 1,000 houses and 2,500 to 3,000 population.
Yeah, sure. So what I can see then, this particular site that I've selected, if we need 1,000 houses, we've got 1,208 houses within 500 meters of that location, and we've got 3,500 people. So from a kind of headline point of view, chances are, if we send it to Paul, it's probably in the right kind of ballpark. So the kind of two key bits that we use to kind of trade off, if you like, when we're looking for this sort of stuff is, if we're looking for the roadside stuff for Daniel, we're looking for 15,000 car movements or more. Well, that's that traffic flow overlay that's going to show me all of that. If I'm then looking for the convenience store side of things, because we sort of had this poll, do we look at both of these, please? Then actually that kind of population number was really kind of the sort of the magic number for us, where we kind of unlocked a lot of these, was just checking, well, what is that sort of 500 meter demographic? Is that kind of densely populated enough for the convenience store operators to drive opportunities out of that? So it's the I suppose Daniel, flood zones and properties in flood zone 3B and this sort of stuff. What I can see with this particular property is that this property isn't in a flood zone, so we haven't got that flood zone 3B problem that Daniel was talking about. If we had actually some tricks around how we can find some reports for similar applications nearby in those same problem planning constraints in effect areas, where we can then save that for another day. My sort of first starting point, if I'm then looking at those convenience stores, then actually I could think about a residential above it if the area is strong enough. So actually, what will be my kind of my first starting point around all of that? We'll be looking at the overlays here and going to the market section up here. This can be really used for a number of different reasons, actually. So the first one is looking at the residential values. So what I can see here is that, firstly, the area that I've chosen where the busy roads are is actually quite a weak area. And sort of see let's get rid of some of this stuff. I've got quite a cluttered map here. Let's just get rid of some of this so it's not looking quite so cluttered. These numbers here are showing me the average residential values across this area in effect. So we're taking neighborhood boundaries from the census and saying, what are the average sales prices per square foot across that area, that little neighborhood in effect. So what it's showing me is that the area that I'm looking at the moment, the average price is £152 a foot. Now that average sale price is, broadly speaking, probably a little bit less now than a new build sales cost in this location. So if I'm a new build cost in this location. So actually, there's no value for me looking in this area really to put resi above Paul. It's just not going to drive me much more value. It's going to take some car parking away. It's probably going to perhaps impact the rent. So in that case, I'm probably not going to look at all at doing that. The flip side is if I go a bit further north and looked up somewhere like this, then actually the average sales price there is 200 quid a foot. So if I've got a build cost of 150, I'm probably going to sell it for more than average. I'll probably sell it about 20 to 30% more than that at the moment. So I'm probably more like, rather than 210 a foot, I'm probably more like sort of 250, 260. That would then drive a land value, which means that putting some resi above it probably going to drive me some extra value into this scheme that then is probably worth doing. So quite quickly I can work out, well, what's my scheme going to look like? Down here, it's going to be a standalone box, which is going to be a co-op or a Starbucks or whatever it might be. Up here, I'm probably thinking, well, actually, could I put some space above it? I might build some flats above a Starbucks, maybe. I probably wouldn't build it above a Mackie D's or a Burger King or something like that. I'm not quite sure those two uses sit particularly comfortably together. So it depends on what interest I got as to whether I might want to consider those things. What's kind of interesting as well is that there's other functionality around all of this where we can start looking at comparables, looking at how do we work out exactly what this particular property is worth, and then off the back of that, also what are the land values that sit alongside that. So if I'm considering a site here, the chances are that I guess 8 times out of 10, Paul and Daniel are bidding for sites, and the other uses on that site probably is a residential use. And therefore, what are residential values in that location? What are residential land values rather in that location? So if I've got half an acre of land and I can get 10 houses on that particular plot, what kind of plot values are local residential developers driving out of those sites for me then to go and work out whether I'm higher or lower than that in terms of the bid that I can make in effect? I think that's probably quite useful. I suppose the other bit that's going to sit alongside that is saying, well, what is that that particular retail unit that I'm looking at? What's that worth? What's the value of that relative to what the person's asking me for that particular property? And I suppose one of the easy places to look at that is saying, well, what are the quoting prices around there? So what we do here, this is our commercial availability here at Nimbus. We, in effect, look at the top 400 surveying firms' websites every night. We look at what properties they're marketing. We then categorize those into whether it's an office use, or retail use, industrial use, or whatever. And then we look at whether it's a sale or to let. We then plot that in the map. So I can then see that up the road here, there's a property on the market, a shed that's 55 grand worth of rent. Click on the link, it's showing me someone with Hardcastle, 55 grand, thanks very much. And then go and have a look at the particulars of that to understand, well, sheds in this, ooh, crikey, that was weird, wasn't expecting that. In effect, showing me what sheds are worth in that location, in effect. I've got some more over here. We can go and find something else, some with Cushman's, off we go to the 11,000 feet unit there, in effect, and we can go and see the particular. I'm going to click that link again, just it's not there either. Deary me, misery. I thought, shall I go and just do it? It's kind of the beauty of demonstrating a live system in front of an audience of about 100 people. So how do we those sites? How do we then look at expectations? How do we work out what that scheme's going to look like to start with, and based on the size of this property, what that might look like? I suppose the next bit that is particularly interesting for me is to say, well, actually, there's sort of two things going on here. One, when you're in Daniel's shoes, you're negotiating with the operator to try and drive that value as highly as you can, to make sure you're getting the highest GDV you can, to then knock off your build cost and your profit, to then be able to bid for the site. So one of the things that is kind of interesting is to be able to see, I suppose for two reasons actually, to be able to see where a particular company is, what they're buying and what they're paying for things. So here in Nimbus we have this thing called the company search, and we're going to go back to the roadside bit now. So I've typed in McDonald's into the company search. Nimbus has gone off and found me all the companies that mention McDonald's, and I want the McDonald's Restaurants Limited company. Nimbus then goes off and it says, what's that company? Where does it sit as part of? So McDonald's Restaurants Limited is a subsidiary of McDonald's Real Estate LLP, and it's got a few other companies as part of that. And then click search, and it plots that portfolio across the map just like that. What I can then start to do is kind of the second thing I could do to go and find sites for this kind of roadside operation, if you like, is I could start to look where Mackie D's are, because the chances are if Mackie D's are in that location, then the chances are that KFC will want to be there. And actually the 15,000 car movements is actually a very similar thing for the coffee operators. So the coffee operators and the Mackie D's of the world will kind of bid for sites that are very similar in effect. But what I can do is I can shoot down into Peterborough and see, well, where are McDonald's across that location? So I can see there's one here and there's one sort of down here in effect. And I was actually looking up here as part of my my search in effect. But there's actually a McDonald's just down there as well. So quite quickly I can start to work out, well, where else might I go? Perhaps I could look at this or something like that, or perhaps even down here and sort of see, well, what other properties are around this sort of location. Based on the fact that Mackie D's are there, what else can I find? And I can then use that same filter up here to say, find me all the pieces of land that are over 0.4 of an acre in that location in effect. But kind of a second way to find stuff, if there isn't a traffic flow movements there, what you can do is start saying, well, where are Mackie D's, where are KFC, where's Starbucks, where's Costa, and sort of then search around those locations using that little tool like that.
Well, sorry, just Paul, I'm very conscious of time actually. Just so, I mean, obviously for the attendees, they can have a full-on personalized demonstration, but I'm just conscious of time. So maybe we could, if that's all. I don't want to cut you short because I know it's your baby and I know you love it.
You've just cut me short the two most powerful bits of this thing. So I know, I'm disgusted and gutted, but we'll leave you to it.
I'm just a bit conscious of time, so maybe you could.
Well, I was going to show you here how you can find out exactly what they can pay, what they bought last, how much they paid for it, what the terms of the lease were, and I was also then going to show you how you find out which developers are working for them and how you work out what they paid for it to see whether you could pay for it. But I can't show you that today, so we're going to.
They can book a demonstration, a personalised demonstration of how to use those features, and there's so much more it does, isn't there? So
absolutely.
So could you perhaps ask the audience, Paul, and see if anybody's got any questions to ask that. So you can book a call back, we can book a demo, and we can get that into the thing. I'll put that in while you're asking any questions to anybody. There's a couple on the thing, but maybe you could ask them to put their hands up.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose if anybody wants to see that in their own time, where they're not cut short like I've just been, then this is the link for you, the bit.ly link, which Simon's putting into the chat for you to book that call. This is some of the stuff, some of the feedback actually we had from some of our customers. But I suppose now it's time for the live Q&A, where you get a chance to ask Paul, ask Daniel, ask us, kind of the questions that you've got at the moment. So what I'd like you to do, if you would like to ask us a question, if you open up your control panel on the Zoom setting, the little button that says raise hand. If I could ask you to click that raise hand button, what we'll do is we'll ask to unmute you, we'll bring you up here, and we'll then answer your question here live. So it's on a little control panel, click raise hand, and that will then alert us here to the fact you want to ask a question. There are quite a few questions while we wait for people to do that, Simon. There are quite a few questions, I think, in the chat and in the Q&A. Actually, do you want to pick those up first?
Yeah, I've just put the bit.ly down. Hopefully everybody's got that link. If they want to book a demonstration, a proper half-hour full demonstration of the platform tailored to them, then that's in there. But
fabulous. So there's kind of a question here from Jay. Is there a requirement from tenants for EV charging points? What's the benefit to rent with EV installed? Let's go for Daniel. Paul, is there?
It's as much of a planning requirement as anything nowadays. Like Daniel touched on in his speech earlier, I think. From a tenant perspective, yes, a lot of tenants do have chosen suppliers that they use to come in and actually manage that process, and they get a rent in there. I'm not sure there will be a massive benefit to a developer, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know whether Daniel will correct me there. Daniel?
Yeah. It's a relatively immature market at the moment, because I suppose the electric car market's growing, but one would argue it's not mature yet. We found the biggest benefit is these EV charging companies bring the power to site, which can be a saving of £20,000-30,000. But who knows where that's going. Previously, they were paying a percentage of a turnover back to the landlord per space, but it's nothing drastic. But as Paul mentioned, it's more of a planning obligation at the moment. But in the future, it might turn out to be more than that. But we certainly don't incorporate any massive uplift in turnover into our appraisals, really, and see it as more of a necessity rather than a value add sort of thing.
okay, so how many spaces do they normally take out? 2 or 3? Is it all?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, but normally it's planning conditions for 2, 3, 4 car parking spaces. Depending.
But one of the benefits is that you might not have to pull the power into yourself, so you give that to them to do, and it saves you the substation 20-30 grand's worth of abnormal cost, which is
exactly
interesting. So that's quite an interesting shout. You had a conversation, didn't you, Paul, the other day with the EV company, and they were saying they could pay a rent per space, couldn't they? Things, but
yeah. So the I'm trying to remember what they said. Actually, I think it was about £1,000 a space they were paying. So it wasn't kind of vast amounts. I think it was that sort of level. Just check back to my notes. I think what's kind of interesting is that you can generate some revenue out the back of those spaces in effect. So it's kind of, you're going to put space in anyway, and actually kind of generating that. This will take quite long-term leases, and which I think was kind of interesting, really, as a model, I suppose. Reasonably strong covenants, reasonably long leases. They pay for the installations. Sort of seems like quite an interesting shout, really. It's not a huge amount of income, but it's something you've got to put in anyway. And so I thought that was quite interesting. I think the model they've been applying has been looking at a particular estates and sort of buddying up with sort of large owners, in effect, to put the operations in. But I think that's now going to become a thing where they sort of roll it out more widely. But
I think what will happen, and what's happening, is a lot of the major companies like us and some of the big players have got partners, and that will form part of the lease, that if there are EV they are managed by, installed by their preferred operators, and they get any benefit of it. I'm not sure that will get passed on to the landlord developer as such.
But it gets quite messy, doesn't it? Because
yeah, we've got talks on a few at the moment that are actually going through planning and things, but it's like you say, it's early in its infancy. I think that's probably one for next year when we've done some of the deals and know where the land lies on a lot of them.
Yeah, sure.
A bit like an ATM almost. It's done with the operator rather than the landlord.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, like the ATMs used to be back in the day, if they were operated separately and rented and had their own business rates and all that sort of jazz. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, very interesting.
There's a question here from Jay, Paul, which is perhaps one for you, which is saying, taking population and household numbers into consideration, how far away would another retail store need to be from another unit in effect?
Yeah, good question. I saw that. There's no hard and fast rule on competition for us. It really depends on the population size, if it can accommodate another food store. If there's a food store there that is not as good quality, doesn't have a good accessibility or as good a parking, then you would take them on. So really every site would be looked at on its own merit, to be honest with you. There's been occasions before where we would take on a competitor, don't want to single anyone out, because we think we got a better offer, better parking, better position, or it might be that they're over trading, it's bursting at the seams, there's not another food store within 5 miles, and it can accommodate 2 at the right sort of hurdle rates for both to succeed. We won't go in against a really, really good offer that's got the only show in town trading its socks off and try and half their turnover, because we'll just end up with 2 loss-making stores and no one's going to win. But I would really just say anything like that, just send them through and we'll come back to you with some quality feedback.
So send it through.
At the time we built one in Nottingham, which was right next door to another one. It was literally next door.
Yeah. There are cases where you go very close. Yeah.
Is that all trick work still? We can go into, we've a family got a site in Kenilworth, the Tesco's, it trades its socks off about 2,500 square feet, and there was a little trick of going in as a landlord to go and check the whiteboard at the back and see what the takings are, to see what the review comes up like that. It's like, £85,000. Oh, trading. How's trade going? Oh, it's all right. But if you talk to store managers, they're desperately keen to tell you how things are trading so well. So as a landlord, that was a nice little trick, I seem to remember.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Who needs
they wouldn't accept it rent, would they? The surveyors wouldn't accept it. Like, but it's doing all this rent, all this turnover rather. The rent should go up, and they were like,
"Oh no, it's terrible.
We're having it, were they?" So Ammon said, "Does Nimbus show current planning applications?" Yes, it does. If only my brother would let me demonstrate it, then we would have shown you that. But so it does.
Alan's not been on a web, demonstration. I think obviously then there's a link just to go book yourself in, and we'll get somebody to give you a proper demo around themselves. So.
Absolutely. There's kind of an interesting question from Dominic, which I kind of feel like I want to hijack actually. So Dominic was saying, talking about the class MA. So this is where you can take new Class E buildings and convert them to residential in effect under the new permitted development rights. I suppose I wanted to kind of just change the question if I could, Dominic, which is, I suppose, Daniel and Paul, have you seen any sort of, I suppose, easing of finding sites because of Class E? Because I guess both of these, the old A3 use and I guess the A1 retail use now are all in the Class E, aren't they? So I guess you've got presumably easier options now. You can go and buy a shed and fit it out and trade it as a retail unit. Are you finding that, or is that an oversimplification of what we're up to at the moment?
Go on, Daniel.
So I suppose from a C-store perspective, there's always the PD from A3 down to A1, so that hasn't really changed. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, as Paul mentioned, pubs and hotels have got the ideal characteristics for a C store. They sit in a different use class, so you still have to go and get a change of use to Class C. Pubs are protected use, is tricky. So there's no major relaxation from that perspective. But I suppose from a drive-through perspective, and I touched on conversions, if we're looking to do, for example, a drive-through coffee, and you find a restaurant which can be converted to a drive-through, then yeah, you've got that use there, but you still need to get a change of use for the drive-through lane. Fast food again sits in a separate use class. It's in sui generis, so there is no relaxation there. Look, they have simplified it. They're still finding their feet. What we're finding is some planners or some local authorities are putting restrictions on Class C. They're saying you can have it as Class C, but you can have it as a Class C drive-through. At times it's easier, at times it isn't. But that's the look through, which is planning.
I think
sorry.
No, I think I've not seen a massive difference or anything. I think ultimately you're always going to need, in the current climate, a planning application, be it for M&E, be it for plant, be it for signage, be it for highways, for access. It's very, very rare you're going to go in and you're going to get something PD right, so you can just go in and fit it out. You're always going to need an application. And planning is, we've not really touched much on planning, but planning's as bigger issue than anything else we've got at the moment. So
that's why, I mean, I know Paul will tell you, but that's why we put the planning export in, so you can search by those planning in that location, and you can see what's been granted, what's been, refused, and look at the planning reports and see what works and what doesn't work, because it gives you that, it allows you to lift up the bonnet of that local authority, doesn't it? Because what I've got, obviously, from your presentations, you're looking quite massive broad patches. Certainly Daniel's looking across the whole country. Yours has got a big patch, and it's very difficult to know all the nuances, isn't it, of every single local authority and parish council and the rest of it. So having that planning export in a single, all those planning applications relevant to what you're looking for in a single location, and then by category, you can sort of filter around quite quickly, check what they like and what they don't like. Most planners I've ever met don't like anything, so that doesn't really help. But you can work around it. You can see what the planning officers are saying or the committee's saying. So, but again, I know we cut Paul short a bit on that one because you could keep going on for. But again, we can show people that if they want a demo, and then we can have a trial of the system, and we can show all that sort of detail. But planning is always a challenge, isn't it, when you're doing anything that's controversial, which is anything to do with changing.
Not controversial even.
Yeah, well, not controversial, but cool. Very interesting. Any more questions, Paul, on that one?
There's a question, does Nimbus Maps show EV CPOs on sites? Keen to find drive-throughs that will support EV CPOs. So I think the answer to that is the bit I was about to show you would find you that as well. So in effect, there's a sort of a keyword search you can do. So in effect, you'd work out what keywords you need for charging stations, in effect, and it would do a search across all the councils for those keywords. You'd look for the word electric vehicle, you look for the word charging, and then maybe some stuff you can remove if you can't find stuff that comes out. I can't think what those would be, but that's how you find those sites.
If there's a lease on it, if there's a ground lease on it as well, if they've registered lease over 7 years, you'd be able to see that as well, wouldn't you? Like
yeah. So you can use the company search to find locations for, kind of where are these charging spots, and to look at all the various companies that sit along for those, in effect. Simon's saying, blame my brother for not allowing us to demo it. I do blame him. Yes, I do blame him.
I will.
Absolutely.
Simon, you can have a demo with Paul on your own. I can guarantee. If you book a demo, I will let Paul demo it to you directly. But
what I was going to say actually is that there is sort of on a sort of more serious note, although that is serious, actually, that is very serious. You can also use the same approach to go and find those big schemes that are talking about convenience stores. So that stuff that Paul's been talking about, saying where is there a sort of a section 106 that this area here is going to be for retail space, and it's going to be a sort of a local food store. You can use that same functionality to go and find that, see who the owners of those sites are, because often the Taylor Wimpey's of the world will just sell that stuff on, and so if you can get at the end of it, then the likes of Paul will take a lease or buy it off you, or kind of whatever you want to do, or perhaps turnkey it or something like that. So so you can find those again through that planning export that, yes, my brother wouldn't let me show you.
Okay, well, ask him. I can ask everybody if they'd like a demo with Paul. Say yes, and I'll ensure that Paul will give you a half-hour demo of the platform. There you go. There's one yes. So Simon said yes. There's one. Anybody?
Nobody else does that. Well, there we go.
Oh yeah, there's John. There you go.
Yeah.
You're going to be busy, Paul. Anyway.
I know. Yeah.
Cool. We didn't say which Paul, of course. That was the
that's true actually. Yeah, we have
Paul D or Paul S. So
fabulous.
cool.
Well, I look forward to those demonstrations.
Quite a few that you're going to be busy over the next few days, Paul, doing a demo, so we can get Paul to it. So Paul Davis, so sorry, Paul S. But any other final questions? I kind of be overrun by about 15 minutes, but I love talking to you guys. But that's Daniel and Paul S. Again. Any more questions for anybody that do you think that's cropped up there, Paul?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll certainly book those that want to call with Paul. Please say yes, and we'll make sure that happens for a demo. Otherwise, you can book a call in, a call back with the team. There's a bit.ly link. It's a compressed link to be able to book that in yourself. Do a demo. Somebody to take a proper demo around what you're specifically looking for, and then we can get you a trial of the system thereafter, and so you can play with it yourself to go through all of that. And yeah, if we'll be sending out a recording as well. I think a couple of people asked, will there be a recording? So that will automatically come through after the webinar. So finally, first of all, I'd like to say thank you ever so much for listening, number one. And number two, thank you, Paul Shepard, for your input. Really useful, really helpful, really interesting. Thank you very much, Daniel, for everything that you said about the drive-throughs and everything there. We will send contact details out for both of you guys as well, if that's okay. I think you both confirmed that's okay, so we'll send that out. If anybody wants to send any sites to either of you or both of you, then those will be sent out. Thank you very much, Paul, for your input into that. And you're going to be busy doing a fair few demos directly, so that's always good. Finally, thank you very much for myself. We've been Nimbus Maps. We're here to help you succeed in your property goals. Thank you ever so much. Bye.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.